Imagine being a successful black CEO, booked into a first-class seat on a major airline, only to be told minutes before takeoff that you must leave your seat without a real explanation. What would you do if the very place where you expected respect suddenly became a stage for humiliation? How do you keep your dignity intact when a system designed to protect you turns against you? This is the story of Miles Harrington, a man who rose from humble beginnings to lead one of the most powerful tech companies in America, only to face silent discrimination at 30,000 feet. What happens when personal success collides with deeply rooted bias? How far would you go to expose injustice that threatens not just your seat, but your very identity? And can one man's calm refusal to accept discrimination spark a movement strong enough to change an entire industry? Join us as we uncover the events that led to a shocking confrontation on a flight, a viral live stream that shook corporate America, and the ultimate battle for accountability and equality. This is more than a story about a seat on a plane. It's about who belongs where and why it matters. If you've ever witnessed discrimination or believe everyone deserves respect, hit like, share this video, and subscribe to join a community fighting for justice. Now, let's dive into Miles Harrington's unforgettable journey. The sky over Seattle was still painted in strokes of pale lavender when Miles Harrington stood in front of his bedroom window, coffee in hand. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Not yet a downpour, just enough to make the air feel clean and the world hushed. A plane sliced quietly through the clouds in the distance, its blinking lights trailing like a constellation in motion. It reminded him why he was awake this early. Today was important. Maybe the most important day of the year. He took a slow sip from his mug, dark roast with just a splash of oat milk, the way his mother had taught him to drink it, strong but smooth, grounding, necessary. Behind him, the apartment was still. He liked it that way. The silence, the stillness, the city not yet buzzing with motion. It gave him a moment to breathe before stepping into a world that often greeted him with skepticism, masked as formality. The living room was a blend of clean modern lines and carefully chosen warmth. An old jazz record leaned against the turntable, waiting for another lazy Sunday. A framed photo of his MIT graduation sat on a bookshelf, his mother beaming, her hand proudly gripping his shoulder. Next to it, a small wooden plaque read, "Legacy is built, not given." His father had carved those words himself when Miles was just 10 years old. Miles turned and walked toward the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his dark charcoal suit. He didn't like flashy things, no silk linings or gaudy watches, but his clothes were always tailored, always clean. Presentation mattered, fair or not. It was the armor he'd learned to wear early in life. His phone buzzed on the dresser, a message from Jenna Cruz, his assistant. "Car will arrive in 20. I triple-checked your seat. 2A confirmed. Also, Reese is on the passenger manifest. Play it cool." Miles stared at the screen for a moment. Clayton Reese. The name alone was enough to stir something sour in his stomach. Apex Corps' executive VP. Brilliant, arrogant, and openly dismissive of Miles ever since Orion Systems began talks to acquire their floundering tech firm. He tapped a reply. "Got it. Let's get this done." Another message came through immediately after. This time, his mother. "Baby, I hope you packed your blue tie. You know it's lucky." Miles chuckled softly. He hadn't just packed it. He was wearing it. The blue tie wasn't much to look at. faded, frayed at one corner but threaded with memory. He wore it the day he landed his first seed round, the day Orion signed its government contract, and now for the day he would finalize the acquisition that could take his company global. He called her, "Mama, Miles, you better not be rushing last minute again." "Did you eat?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, only half lying. A protein bar didn't really count. You know how they are. Her voice softened, tinged with something heavier than worry. "Don't get too comfortable, no matter how high up you fly." Miles sighed. "I'm sitting in first class." "Mama, I'll be fine." There was a pause. "So was your father, the time they made him give up his seat." "You remember that I do." He said, "Quiet now." "And Boston. When that hotel lost your reservation." He didn't reply right away. Not because he forgot, but because he remembered too well. "Some things change," he said finally. "Some things don't. I just want you to come home safe. Keep your cool, whatever happens, and don't let anyone make you feel small. Not today, not ever. I hear you. Mama, I love you." He ended the call and stood still for a moment, and the phone pressed gently to his chest. Keep your cool. That phrase stayed with him, a mantra, a survival tool. He stepped into his office to review the final acquisition terms. Jenna had prepared everything: timetables, due diligence, and the restructuring plan. Apex Corp's algorithms had promise, but the company itself was sinking. Miles had the power and leverage to save hundreds of jobs, especially the young developers from underrepresented backgrounds that Apex Corp had only recently hired in a diversity campaign. That part mattered to him, not just optics, legacy. His company, Orion Systems, had started in a one-bedroom apartment with a whiteboard and a refurbished laptop. Now it was valued at over $8 billion, but every boardroom he walked into, he still saw the second glances, the quiet calculations in people's eyes. Does he belong here? Is he the assistant? The bodyguard, that quiet scrutiny was louder than any words. The intercom buzzed. "Your car has arrived, Mr. Harrington." He shut his laptop, folded the acquisition folder into his carry-on, and took one last look around. The city outside was waking up now, steam rising from grates, traffic signals blinking to life, a bus sighing at a corner stop. Miles Harrington picked up his briefcase, adjusted his lucky blue tie, and headed for the door. He had a seat to claim, a deal to close, and no idea that by the end of the day, the world would be watching. The car ride to the airport was silent, except for the low hum of tires rolling over wet asphalt. Miles Harrington sat in the back seat, one hand resting on his leather carry-on, the other on his lap. He watched the city blur past the window, high-rises giving way to quiet neighborhoods, sleepy coffee shops, and early joggers bundled against the drizzle. Rain clung to the glass like tiny questions waiting for answers. He was always thoughtful before a major deal, but this morning felt different. He couldn't explain it. Something tightened in his chest. Not fear, not anxiety, just pressure. The kind that came from knowing every step he took today would echo far beyond a boardroom. He glanced down at his suitcase, a soft brown roller bag, scuffed on the corners. It had been with him since the beginning. Every investor pitch, every red-eye flight, every client visit. He never checked luggage, not out of convenience, but because once years ago a lost bag had cost him his only decent suit before a meeting that could have saved his startup. He showed up anyway, wearing jeans and a button-down, and somehow convinced the room. But he never took that chance again. Inside the suitcase were only the essentials: a change of clothes, toiletries, a printed copy of the Apex Corps acquisition agreement, his laptop, and a small velvet pouch. He opened it, slowly, revealing a worn gold pocket watch with a thin crack across the glass. It had belonged to his father, a man who had worked 37 years at the port of Savannah, loading containers in the sweltering heat. On his retirement day, the union had gifted him this watch. For time well spent, the engraving read on the back. Miles had held on to it like a compass ever since his father passed. He didn't carry it for luck. He carried it for perspective. As the car approached SeaTac International, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Jenna Cruz. F.Y. Reese already arrived. His assistant checked him in 30 minutes ago. Miles typed a quick reply. Thanks, I'm staying focused. He added a period and then deleted it. No need for punctuation when you were trying to project calm. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked ahead. The airport loomed, all glass and steel, reflective under the gray sky, a gateway to the next phase of his company, or the place where something went terribly wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that one word, one look, one decision might tip the scale today. The car pulled into the designated lane. The driver, an older man with gentle eyes, stepped out and retrieved his bag. "Safe travels, sir," he said with sincerity. "Thank you," Miles replied, tucking the pocket watch back into its pouch and zipping his carry-on shut. He walked through the sliding doors and into the terminal, immediately swallowed by the rhythm of travel. Rolling bags, loudspeakers announcing delays, families navigating check-in lines, flight crews moving with purposeful strides. Miles moved like he belonged there, because he did. He had every right to be in that space. But even now, he noticed the subtle things. How security guards' eyes lingered a beat longer when he passed. How a man at the kiosk next to him double-checked his own boarding pass when Miles scanned his. These weren't things you could always name, but you felt them. In your skin, in your breath, in the way your body anticipated confrontation even in silence. He arrived at the Solace Air priority check-in counter. A young black man stood behind the desk. His name tag read Noah Kim. Noah's eyes lit up the moment he saw Miles. "Mr. Harrington?" he asked, a little breathless. Miles smiled. "That's me. I read your feature in Forbes last year, the one about the facial recognition ethics bill. You're doing incredible work." "I appreciate that," Miles said warmly. "Thanks for saying so." "You're in 2A today," Noah said, tapping the keyboard. "Non-stop to Atlanta, checked in and cleared. We're lucky to have you on board." Miles nodded. "We all get where we are with help. I had people open doors for me when no one else would. I'm just trying to leave some open behind me." Noah paused for a moment, then handed over the boarding pass. "You already are, sir. Have a great flight." Miles pocketed the ticket and made his way toward TSA pre-check. The line was short, efficient. Still, a second agent appeared beside him as he placed his items in the tray. "Random screening," the agent said, not asking, just declaring. Miles said nothing. He simply stepped aside, arms raised, shoes already off. He'd learned not to resist these moments, not because he agreed with them, but because some fights weren't worth picking in the hallway. As he stood there, arms spread, a memory surfaced. He had been 15, flying for the first time with his high school debate team. Security had pulled him aside then, too. made him unpack his bag while his classmates watched. The coach hadn't said anything. No one had. But he'd seen the looks, the discomfort, the way they avoided meeting his eyes afterward. It had shaped something in him, not bitterness, just awareness. The screening ended with a half-hearted thank you for your cooperation. Miles nodded, retrieved his belongings, and walked calmly to the lounge. Inside, the air changed. Softer lighting, the clink of glassware, leather chairs, polite conversation. He found a seat in the corner and opened his laptop, but his thoughts wandered. His mother's voice echoed again. Keep your cool, whatever happens. It wasn't just advice, it was armor, a way to survive in rooms that weren't built for you. He thought of the Apex Corps employees who didn't know their future depended on what happened today. Thought of the developers, the admin staff, the interns, especially the interns. He remembered being one, carrying coffee, writing code no one read, watching others get credit for your work. He wanted this acquisition not just for power, not just for Orion, but because he knew what it could do for the people no one else saw. He closed the laptop. Outside the window, a plane ascended into the sky, vanishing behind clouds. Soon, it would be his turn. But for now, he waited, calm, still, prepared. The lounge quieted around him as Miles Harrington closed his laptop and leaned back in the chair. Outside, the clouds had thickened into heavy gray cotton. He could feel the pressure building in the sky and, somehow, inside himself as well. The kind of pressure that came before a storm, or a moment that changes everything. He glanced at his watch. Still an hour before boarding. Enough time to breathe. Maybe too much time to think. A server passed by offering coffee. He accepted it with a polite nod and took a sip. It was bitter, not bad, just strong and without apology. It reminded him of something his father used to say when things got hard. Life isn't sweet by default. Son, you make it sweet by what you add to it. Across the lounge, a familiar voice rose over the ambient murmur. I told them this acquisition is a mistake from day one. You can't let outsiders run legacy tech. The words were loud enough to cut through conversation and quiet enough to still feel sneaky. Miles didn't look up immediately. He recognized the voice without needing to see the face. Clayton Reese, Executive Vice President of Apex Corps, strategist, spokesman, saboteur. Miles had read the memos, watched the interviews. There was always a glint in Clayton's eyes that said more than his words. He could praise diversity on camera and erase it in practice before the lights cooled. Clayton stood at the far end of the lounge, phone to his ear, pacing with urgency. His suit looked expensive but a size too large, like he had borrowed a version of power he hadn't earned. Miles tilted his head just enough to catch a glimpse. Clayton's eyes flicked toward him, registering recognition, and then quickly shifted away as if Miles was a detail he intended to ignore, a complication he thought would disappear. He continued speaking into the phone. I'm telling you, if they let this guy take control, it's over. He doesn't understand the culture here. He's not one of us. Not one of us. The words settled in Miles's gut like a rock. He looked away, focusing on his coffee again, now cooling in his hand. A small gesture to reclaim calm. He knew how fast emotion could unravel progress, especially for someone like him. A raised voice could be twisted into aggression. A justified protest could become defiance. So he stayed still, breathing through the insult, Across the room, a woman in a beige trench coat entered the lounge, scanning the area for a seat. Her eyes passed over Miles's table and moved on, even though the seats beside him were empty. She eventually sat near the window, beside a middle-aged white man in a navy blazer who smiled at her without words. Little things. Miles didn't look angry, but he felt it coil around his ribs like wire. This wasn't new, but it was still sharp, still exhausting. A few minutes later, the boarding announcement buzzed softly over the lounge speakers. Solace Air Flight 418 to Atlanta now boarding. First class and priority passengers may proceed to gate C-17. Miles stood, slipping his laptop back into his bag. As he zipped it closed, a voice came from beside him. Mr. Harrington. He turned to see a young woman, maybe 21, holding a spiral notebook and a press badge clipped to her tote. Her eyes were bright but nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Tasha Raymond. I go to Northwestern. I saw your TED Talk on bias and artificial intelligence last semester." Miles smiled, not out of vanity, but because her sincerity was impossible to ignore. "Thanks for watching," he said warmly. "I'm actually flying to Atlanta, too." She said, "Journalism conference. I just wanted to say your work. It's important." He nodded. "Good luck at the conference." "Thanks," she said, hesitating. "Oh, and don't let people like him." She tilted her head slightly toward Clayton. "Take up your piece." Miles raised an eyebrow. "You heard that half the lounge did," Tasha replied, "but we also saw you stay composed." She offered a quiet smile and headed for the gate. Miles followed shortly behind her, joining the priority line. There weren't many people ahead of him, just enough for the silence between passengers to stretch awkwardly. He noticed he was the only black passenger in the first-class queue. That wasn't new either. At the gate, the agent smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Harrington," he said, scanning the boarding pass. His name tag read Noah Kim. "I use Orion Security on my home network. Solid system." "Appreciate that," Miles replied. "You're in 2A, Noah added, handing him back the pass. "Enjoy the flight, sir." Miles stepped through the jet bridge, his footsteps echoing faintly in the metal corridor. He had walked this path countless times before, but somehow this one felt weighted, like something was waiting inside that aircraft. Not dramatic, just inevitable. He stepped into the plane. The air was cool. The lights dimmed to a soft hue. Classical music played low over the speakers. A flight attendant stood at the door, blonde, late 30s, professionally put together. "Good afternoon," she said without a smile. Her badge read Lindsay Monroe. Miles nodded, but her eyes moved past him almost immediately to the passenger behind. He made his way to his seat in 2A, a window seat, comfortable leather, a fresh pillow. He placed his bag beneath the seat in front and sat down, finally letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding. From the corner of his eye, he saw Clayton board the plane a few minutes later. His seat, 3C, one row back, across the aisle, perfect positioning, close enough to watch, close enough to whisper. Clayton placed his briefcase into the overhead bin with more force than necessary and sat down with a theatrical sigh. "Hope the Wi-Fi works today," he said loudly to no one. Hard to make billion-dollar decisions next to amateurs. Miles ignored him. A different flight attendant, South Asian, early 30s, approached with a warm smile. His name tag read Dev Patel. "Can I offer you a beverage before takeoff? Sir, champagne? Juice? Water?" "Water's fine. Thank you." Miles replied. Dev returned a moment later, placing the glass on the tray gently. He offered a nod of appreciation and moved down the aisle. As passengers continued to board, Lindsay greeted each one with warmth, smiles, welcome backs, compliments on jackets. Miles noted the difference. Tasha passed by, offering a quiet thumbs up as she headed to the back. Miles nodded in return. Then, Lindsay passed by again, this time avoiding Miles's row altogether, only to linger beside Clayton's seat. "Nice to see you again, Mr. Reese," she said, the brightness in her tone suddenly blooming. Miles heard Clayton chuckle. Always a pleasure to fly with Solace. He caught Miles's eye as if daring him to say something. Miles didn't blink. He just sipped his water and watched the clouds thicken beyond the window. Something was coming, and deep down, he knew it would not stay inside the walls of this aircraft. Miles Harrington adjusted the cuff of his jacket and let his fingers settle against the soft armrest of seat 2A. The leather was supple, cool to the touch, a small symbol of comfort that he knew better than to take for granted. Over the years, he had learned that first class was not just about space or legroom. It was about assumption. Who gets welcomed? Who gets questioned? Who gets offered champagne without hesitation? And who gets eyed with suspicion when simply sitting down? Today was no exception. Lindsay Monroe passed his row again, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. She was speaking to passengers across the aisle with practiced charm, but when her eyes flicked briefly in Miles's direction, the warmth faded. Not hostility, not overt disdain, just that subtle shift, the kind that spoke volumes, across the aisle. Clayton Reese was already reclining in his seat, chatting with a businessman he clearly recognized from some previous conference circuit. Clayton's voice carried intentionally, like a performance in a crowded courtroom. Miles knew this tactic well. Say just enough within earshot to provoke without being accountable. These mergers never stick anyway, Clayton said with a laugh, especially when the buyer's out of his depth. I give it 6 months before the board regrets everything. The man beside him chuckled uncomfortably, glancing toward Miles as if unsure whether he should be laughing at all. Miles kept his gaze on the window, his fingers tracing the edge of the armrest. He had long learned the art of appearing unaffected, but inside, a quiet current of irritation stirred. Still, he stayed silent. The boarding process continued, and more passengers filtered into the cabin. A tall woman in a red coat, a young couple whispering and comparing tickets, an older man holding a briefcase like it carried state secrets. Miles noticed it all, not because he was nosy, but because observation had been part of his survival for years. You watched how people moved around you, how they reacted to you. Not everyone was hostile, but not everyone was neutral either. Dev Patel returned with a gentle smile. Can I get you anything else? Mr. Harrington. Miles shook his head. This is perfect. Thank you. If you need anything at all. I'm just up front. Dev added, I'm working the first-class cabin today along with Lindsay. There was something in the way he said it, as if he already sensed the tension. Miles nodded. Appreciate you. Dev gave a respectful nod and continued down the aisle. The cabin was nearly full now. Bags stowed, belts clicking into place. Tasha Raymond passed through on her way to her seat farther back, offering another quick glance toward Miles. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement. She gave a quiet smile in return. Then, just before the aircraft doors closed, Lindsay returned. She stopped beside Miles's seat, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her expression was no longer neutral, it was stern. Her voice was low and tight, just enough for him to hear. "Sir, there appears to be a discrepancy with your seat assignment." Miles blinked. "A discrepancy?" "Yes, our manifest shows this seat was reserved for crew use. We'll need you to relocate to economy class." Miles kept his posture still. "I checked in with this seat, I was confirmed at the gate, and your colleague already served me water in this exact spot. There may have been an update after boarding began." Lindsay replied flatly, "These things happen. I'm simply following protocol." Miles slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened his boarding pass, holding it up clearly. "Seat 2A, first class, booked 2 weeks ago, checked in yesterday, confirmed by your gate agent 20 minutes ago." Lindsay barely glanced at the screen. "I understand what the pass says, sir, but I'm going by our in-flight system. It's a crew-designated seat. You'll need to gather your belongings." The cabin was quiet now. The passengers in rows 1 through 4 had all grown still, their attention drawn to the exchange. Some looked away quickly. Others didn't bother to hide their curiosity. Miles felt the heat rising in his chest, not from embarrassment, but from the familiarity of the moment. He had done everything right. He had followed every rule, and still, here he was, being told that the rules didn't apply, not for him. He kept his voice measured. "I'd like to speak with the captain." Lindsay's lips tightened. "The captain is preparing for departure. I can assure you this matter has already been reviewed. Then I'd like to speak to your supervisor on board. I'm the lead on this flight," she said. There was a pause. A deep, thick silence filled the space between them. And then, from the front of the cabin, a voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" A man stepped into view, late 50s, square jaw, white hair under his captain's cap, 4 stripes on his shoulder, Captain Richard Cole. Lindsay turned to him quickly. "This passenger is in a seat that's flagged for crew use, Captain. He's refusing to comply with the reassignment." Captain Cole looked at Miles for a moment, then glanced at the phone still in his hand. "Sir, if there's a problem with your boarding pass, we'll need you to follow crew instructions until it can be resolved." "There is no problem," Miles said evenly. "My boarding pass is valid. Your own gate agent confirmed it. You're asking me to move without explanation." The captain's voice remained steady. "Our system says otherwise. For the comfort and safety of all passengers, we need you to move to the reassigned seat now. We're already behind schedule." There it was. The decision had already been made. And it didn't matter how calm Miles stayed, how clearly he presented the facts, how valid his claim was. The system had spoken, and the system was never wrong. Not when it was used to justify these kinds of decisions. Miles exhaled slowly. "May I collect my belongings?" "Quickly, please," Lindsay said. Her tone clipped. Miles stood. He could feel the eyes, all of them, watching, judging, or maybe sympathizing. It didn't matter. From behind, Clayton's voice rang out in a low, smug drawl. Some people just don't know their place. Miles didn't look back. He retrieved his bag from under the seat and turned toward the aisle. And then he walked. Not hurried, not slouched, not defeated, just steady. Each step a reminder that dignity didn't require permission. He passed row after row, the hum of the aircraft the only sound. At row 31, Lindsay gestured to a middle seat, the kind no one wanted. "This is your new seat," she said. "Thank you for cooperating." Her voice was flat, cold, final. Miles sat down. To his left, a man had already claimed the armrest. To his right, a young woman looked at him with wide eyes, then leaned slightly toward him. That was total BS. She whispered, "I saw the whole thing. I'm Tasha Raymond, journalism student, and you're Miles Harrington." "Right." He turned, surprised. "I am." She nodded firmly. "You should record this. You should record all of it." Miles said nothing, but slowly, quietly, he reached into his pocket and opened the voice memo app. The air around seat 31B felt different. It wasn't just tighter leg room or the compressed hum of the economy cabin. It was the silence, the kind that pressed against the skin, a silence filled with too many questions and not enough courage to ask them out loud. Around Miles, passengers stole glances, then quickly looked away. Some offered half-hearted smiles, others busied themselves with seat belts and tray tables, pretending not to notice the man in the tailored charcoal suit now wedged into a middle seat between two strangers. Tasha Raymond sat to his right. The journalism student who had recognized him immediately was now scrolling through her phone with a focused expression. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "What they did to you. It wasn't just wrong. It was orchestrated." Miles gave a small nod, eyes forward. His jaw was tight, his fingers resting loosely on his thighs, shoulders squared as best they could be within the cramped space. He had spent most of his adult life navigating situations just like this different setting. Same dynamic. The quiet humiliation that arrived not with a shout, but with a smile and a policy. He opened his phone and tapped the red circle on his voice memo app. The recording began. He said nothing at first, just let the silence breathe. Then he spoke, his voice low but steady. "This is Miles Harrington, CEO of Orion Systems. I was removed from my first-class seat on Solace Air Flight 418. No explanation, no real reason, just a quiet override that I was expected to accept. The lead flight attendant claimed it was for crew use, but my boarding pass was valid, confirmed by the gate agent. I've been moved to economy, row 31, seat B." He paused, letting the words settle into the device. Tasha leaned in slightly. "You should go, love," she whispered. "This can't be handled quietly anymore." Miles hesitated. He had never been the kind of man who looked for attention. He believed in working harder, staying composed, choosing long-term impact over temporary outrage. But this wasn't just about him now. He could feel it. This was about every passenger who had ever been silently questioned, every professional who had walked into a room and been mistaken for anything but what they were. He opened his camera app and switched to the front lens. His reflection looked calm, but his eyes carried something more. Not anger, not yet, but resolve. A kind of weariness that came from knowing that even when you did everything right, it still might not be enough. He tapped the Go Live button. The screen shifted. A red dot appeared. He waited 3 seconds, then he began. "My name is Miles Harrington. Some of you may know me as the founder and CEO of Orion Systems. Today, I boarded Solace Air Flight 418 to Atlanta for a critical business meeting. I was confirmed in seat 2A, first class. I've flown this route many times." He paused. "Today, I was removed from that seat. No explanation that made sense. No mistake on my part. Just a sudden shift in tone and policy. I was told it was a crew-designated seat. Despite having documentation, Despite checking in properly, I was asked to move. The comments started appearing on the screen. At first, just a trickle. That's insane. Isn't he the AI guy? I just Googled him. Yep, that's Miles Harrington. Why would they move him? The view count ticked up. 500, 800, over 1,000. He continued speaking, calmly, clearly. I'm not going to speculate on the motivation, but I will say this. There's a pattern, a consistent one, where people of color, even when successful, even when accomplished, are asked to prove they belong, again and again. Tasha gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. You should talk about Clayton, she said quietly. Miles hesitated, then spoke again. A senior executive from a rival company is seated one row behind my original seat. He made derogatory comments in the lounge, implying I wasn't qualified to lead. His presence on this flight may or may not be connected, but the timing raises questions. By now, more passengers were tuning in. Some pulled out their phones, others whispered to each other. Dev Patel, the junior flight attendant, passed by and glanced at Miles. His face was conflicted. He came back a minute later with a cup of water and crouched slightly beside the row. I just wanted to say, Dev said under his breath, I checked the manifest. There was no crew block on 2A. You were supposed to be there. I don't know why she did it. Miles blinked. Are you willing to say that on record? Dev hesitated, his eyes darting toward the front of the plane. I don't know. I could get fired. I understand, Miles said. You've already said more than most. Dev gave a quiet nod and walked away. The comments on the live stream were flooding in now. This is insane. Racial profiling in plain sight. Tag Solace Air. Make them answer. The hashtag Solace Discrimination began to appear. Tasha leaned over, whispering again. They're watching. I guarantee it. At that moment, Miles's phone buzzed with a message from Jenna. Are you okay? I'm getting alerts. Twitter's blowing up. He texted back quickly. I'm fine. Not quiet, but fine. Then added, find out who at Solace made the change. We need that name. In first class. Clayton Reese was shifting in his seat. He was now aware of the live stream. His smirk had faded. He leaned over to Lindsay Monroe, whispering furiously. She glanced toward the back, then pulled out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, probably reporting the video. But it was too late. 10,000 viewers, 20,000. The numbers kept climbing. Miles ended the stream with the simple sentence, this isn't about a seat, it's about dignity. And whether it's granted or taken away depending on who you are, I'm fortunate to have a voice. But I shouldn't need one to be treated with fairness. None of us should. He tapped End Live. The cabin around him was unusually quiet. Passengers were now aware that something beyond routine was unfolding. A few nodded at him. One older woman across the aisle mouthed thank you. A business traveler nearby spoke softly into his phone, likely describing the incident to someone else. Miles looked down at his phone again. New notifications. A tech journalist tagging Solace Air's account. An industry analyst weighing in on Miles's credibility. A public statement from someone on Orion's board offering full support. His heart beat faster, not from fear, from the sense that what had begun as a personal indignity was now turning into a public reckoning. Tasha looked at him. You think they're going to try to shut this down? Maybe, Miles said, but the stream's already out there. That seat may be gone, but the truth is airborne now. She smiled. You have a way with words." He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, the recycled air washing over his face, and for the first time since being told to move, he allowed himself a breath that was not burdened by control. The truth was out, and the storm had just begun. It wasn't just the space that felt smaller, it was the weight of it all. The weight of being watched, the weight of being second-guessed, the weight of history pressing down on one seat in row 31, like the gravity had thickened only there. Miles Harrington sat quietly between two strangers, his shoulders pressed inward to avoid invading anyone else's space. On his left, a man in his 50s read a newspaper with stiff, deliberate page turns. On his right, Tasha Raymond sat upright, arms crossed, jaw tense. Neither of them spoke for a moment, but the silence between them hummed with shared understanding. The plane was in the air now. They had passed 10,000 feet. The seatbelt sign dinged off with a familiar chime. People shifted, stretched, reclined. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, beginning drink service. But Miles didn't reach for anything. He simply sat with his hands folded, his body still, as though movement might crack the shell he had carefully built to contain the humiliation. In first class, his original seat remained empty, a hollow symbol of something that had been taken without reason. It wasn't about the comfort. It was about what it represented: ownership, belonging, identity. And now it was vacant, untouched, like no one ever deserved it. Tasha turned toward him at last. "What are you going to do with the recording?" she asked softly. Miles exhaled through his nose. "I don't know yet. You should release it," she said. "People need to see what just happened. Hear it." Miles stared at the seat back in front of him. His reflection was faint in the screen of the black, unlit monitor, his own eyes looking back at him, as if waiting for a decision. "I've always believed in fixing things quietly," he said, "in choosing the calm route, fighting from inside the system. Today, I'm not sure that's enough." Tasha looked at him with quiet intensity. "You don't need to go viral to matter," she said. "But when people like you stay silent, the people who do things like this think they can get away with it forever." Miles nodded slowly. He knew she was right. He reached into the pocket of his blazer and pulled out his phone. The live stream from earlier had already been clipped, shared, reposted. Comments were pouring in. Friends, colleagues, strangers, even media accounts were tagging Solace Air, demanding accountability. But another notification caught his eye. A text from Jenna Cruz. "Something strange on your ticket. Solace's system logged a suspicious access just before boarding. Someone tried to cancel your seat." Miles stared at the message. His fingers tightened around the phone. He typed back quickly, "Who I'm trying to find out." Jenna replied, "But I'd bet money it wasn't random." Another ding. This time, a notification from a private Slack channel, his internal team chat at Orion Systems. "Board support confirmed. We stand with you. Let us know what you need." The support was immediate, unwavering, but it only made the situation feel heavier, because behind the support was anger, and behind the anger was pain, shared pain, familiar pain. Dev Patel appeared again. He was making his way down the aisle with a cart, but his eyes kept glancing in Miles's direction. When he reached row 31, he bent slightly, voice low. "I don't know how much you've been told," Dev whispered, "but I overheard Lindsay speaking to someone before takeoff. She mentioned a call from the ground, asking about your seat." Miles's heart picked up. From who I don't know, but she said your name like it was a warning, not a guest. Miles nodded. Thank you. Dev. Dev hesitated. I just want you to know, he added. Not everyone on this crew agrees with what happened. I'm sorry. Miles met his eyes. You did what you could. Dev continued down the aisle, but Tasha was already writing something in her notebook. We need to collect witness statements, she said. If this turns into an investigation, they'll try to rewrite the narrative. Make it sound like a misunderstanding. You need evidence. Miles leaned back. His muscles ached from the tension, from the way he had held himself together in front of so many eyes. It would have been easy to lose his temper, easy to demand, to shout, to resist. But he knew what that would look like, what it would be twisted into. Angry black man, disruptive, aggressive, no mention of the facts, just a snapshot stripped of context and coated in bias. And that was the cruelest part. You had to carry not only the wound, but the responsibility for how others perceived it. You ever think about walking away from all of it? He asked suddenly. Tasha looked at him. From what? From the fight, Miles said. From the constant explaining. Just let them have their seats and their assumptions. Tasha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I used to, but then I think about who's watching, who's listening, who's waiting to know it's okay to speak up. Miles nodded again. He opened his notes app and began typing. A timeline of events. The gate agent confirming the seat. The crew interaction. The removal. Clayton's comment. Lindsay's refusal to engage. Dev's confirmation. He was building a record, not for vengeance, but for clarity. The drink cart returned. Dev handed him a glass of ginger ale this time. Captain, just got a message from corporate, he said in a hushed voice. They know about the stream. Something's happening. Miles didn't ask for more. He knew enough. The dominoes were starting to fall. He looked over at Tasha, who was now scrolling through Twitter. You're trending, she said. Journalists are picking it up. One outlet called it corporate profiling at 30,000 feet. Miles closed his eyes briefly. He didn't want to be a headline. He just wanted to sit in the seat he paid for. But sometimes the seat becomes the symbol. Sometimes what's taken from you becomes the reason someone else finally speaks. The intercom crackled. Captain Richard Cole's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Atlanta. Please ensure your seat belts are fastened and tray tables are stowed. The aircraft dipped gently. Outside the window, clouds parted to reveal a tapestry of lights below, the city glowing, alive, unaware of the storm coming its way. Inside the plane, the air felt charged, not angry, not yet, but changed. Like truth had been let loose in a place where it was rarely welcome. As the wheels touched down, the cabin jostled softly, a single moment of gravity pulling everything back to earth. Miles opened his eyes and looked forward. First class was still up there, empty, waiting, and behind him, row 31 had become something more than an afterthought. It had become the place where silence ended. The plane rolled into the gate with a gentle shudder, the metal belly of Solace Air Flight 418 finally kissing the Atlanta tarmac. Overhead, compartments clicked open with a chorus of impatience as passengers stood, stretched, and reached for their bags. But Miles Harrington remained seated. He watched as heads turned to the front of the cabin, where the captain made a final announcement. Welcome to Atlanta, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Solace Air, We thank you for flying with us today. Local time is 4:16 p.m. and the temperature is 79 degrees. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign is off. The seatbelt chime echoed and people moved. But Miles stayed still. Tasha Raymond stood beside him, backpack already slung over one shoulder. "You okay?" Miles nodded, but the weariness in his eyes betrayed him. His phone buzzed again and again. Mentions, notifications, emails, news alerts. The quiet turbulence had followed him from the sky to the ground. He stood slowly, stretching the ache from his back. His posture straightened, but his mind spun with the weight of what was waiting beyond the terminal doors. A decision had to be made. He could either walk off the plane and let the news cycle pass, or he could meet it head on. As they stepped into the aisle, Clayton Reese was already halfway out of first class, whispering to Lindsay Monroe, who clutched a tablet tightly against her chest. Both avoided looking back. Miles and Tasha made their way toward the exit. Dev Patel stood near the cockpit door, greeting passengers with a practiced smile. But when Miles passed, he offered something more. A silent nod of respect, a subtle acknowledgement of the storm that had formed in row 31. Miles paused and turned to him. "Dev," he said under his breath, "you ever think about doing something that might cost you your job, but protect your integrity?" Dev looked up. "Every day." Miles reached into his coat pocket and handed him a business card. "If you ever want to talk about what you saw today, call me." Dev took the card without a word and slipped it into his shirt pocket. Then Miles stepped into the jet bridge. The stale airport air hit him first, then the sound chatter, footsteps, the mechanical beeping of a cart backing up. But it was the cluster of reporters that made him freeze. 5 of them, maybe more. Holding up smartphones, small cameras, one with a wireless mic already turned on. All of them shouting variations of the same question. "Mr. Harrington, was it racial profiling? Did Solace Air target you because of your race? Do you plan to sue the airline? He wasn't prepared for this. Not like this, but then again, whoever is." Tasha put a hand gently on his arm. "You have a choice," she said quietly. "Speak now, or someone else will speak for you." Miles looked straight into the nearest camera lens. "My name is Miles Harrington. I'm the CEO of Orion Systems. Today, I was removed from my confirmed first-class seat with no explanation. Despite proper documentation and gate confirmation, I was told the seat had been reassigned for crew use. That was false." The reporters leaned in. I was escorted to the back of the plane without cause. My seat remained empty for the entire flight, and I believe this happened because of who I am, not what I did. Because I looked out of place in seat 2A, because someone decided I didn't belong. Flashbulbs flickered, someone whispered behind a notepad, another camera focused on him tighter. "Let me be clear," Miles said. "This is not just about me. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong in a space they've earned. It's about systems that punish the calm and reward the biased. And yes, this incident was racially motivated. Gasps, scribbling pens, a wave of social media updates firing into cyberspace in real time. A security officer appeared near the gate, watching the scene unfold, but didn't interfere." Miles turned slightly toward Tasha. "You've got video from back there." She nodded. "I recorded from the moment they confronted you. Send it to Jenna," he said. "She's pulling everything together." Another reporter asked, "Will there be legal action? I'm not here to make threats," Miles replied. "I'm here to make things transparent. What happened at 30,000 feet won't stay hidden under the clouds." With that, he walked, calm, unhurried steps through the terminal. People stared, some pointed. A few approached and said thank you. Others simply moved aside, unsure of what they had just witnessed, but certain it mattered. They exited through a private corridor where Jenna Cruz was already waiting near baggage claim. Jenna looked tired but focused, her phone pressed to her ear as she gave someone instructions. When she spotted Miles, she hung up and hurried over. "It's everywhere," she said without greeting. "CNN, Forbes, even tech blogs are running it." Solace issued a generic statement, said they're reviewing the incident and support diversity. Miles gave a dry laugh. "Of course they do." "I spoke to the board," Jenna added. "They're backing you completely. But there's something else. We traced the login that altered your seat assignment." Miles raised an eyebrow. "It came from an internal Solace server in Chicago," Jenna said, "under an employee ID flagged for suspicious activity. And guess what? That ID was linked to someone with connections to Clayton Reese." A cold realization washed over Miles. "So this wasn't just passive bias," he said. "It was orchestrated." Tasha stepped forward. "You need to go public with all of it. We're doing a press conference in the morning," Jenna said, "and I already scheduled an interview with Nightline." "But Miles, we need something tonight." Miles looked around. People, screens, airports had always been his liminal space, between one destination and the next, but today it had become a battleground. He opened his phone again and tapped record. Then he spoke. "This is Miles Harrington. Today, I was reminded that power can be fragile when people fear its shape, that dignity is questioned not by accident, but by design, that the higher you climb, the more invisible your humanity becomes to some." He let the words settle. No edits, no filter. "I'm not going to be silent. Not anymore. Because what happened to me doesn't stop at Gate C-17. It happens in offices, boardrooms, classrooms, and quiet conversations when no one's looking." He paused, his voice calm and resolute. "So, I'm going live. Not just to expose what happened, but to change what's allowed to happen again." He ended the video, then hit post. Within minutes, it had tens of thousands of views. The storm had found its voice, and this time it was one that couldn't be ignored. The silence of the hotel suite felt heavier than the cabin air had. Miles Harrington sat near the window of the 23rd floor, watching the skyline of Atlanta melt into the haze of dusk. The city glittered with movement, cars weaving through streets, people walking, neon signs blinking through thick glass, but in the room, everything was still. Jenna Cruz sat at the desk behind him, tapping on her laptop with quiet precision, coordinating statements, reviewing footage, building the timeline of what had unraveled at 30,000 feet. Tasha Raymond was pacing softly near the minibar, phone in hand, speaking to a fellow journalism student. Her tone was calm, but her movements betrayed her energy nervous, electric, on edge. A tablet lay on the coffee table in front of Miles, replaying footage from earlier in the day. The video of him being asked to leave his seat, the live stream, his short post after landing. It had all taken on a life of its own. The video had now reached over 2 million views. 2 million people watching a man professional, composed, successful, be quietly told that he didn't belong. Miles muted the video. You ever wonder, he said aloud, if saying something actually changes anything? Jenna paused typing. You said something, and it already changed everything. Did it? Miles replied, still staring out at the skyline. Or did it just light a fire that someone else will come along and smother once the press dies down? Tasha looked up. You think you shouldn't have spoken. I think I shouldn't have had to, he said, voice low. That's the part that sticks. I built a company. I mentor. I donate. I hired diverse. I lead with transparency. I did everything the way they said would earn you a seat. And they still took it. Jenna said, not just took it, he whispered. They left it empty. Tasha walked over, setting her phone down. The board wants you to push harder, Jenna said. They're behind you, Miles. They want a public investigation, an apology. Some are even calling for a boycott of Solace Air until answers come. And Clayton Miles asked, He's gone dark. Jenna replied, No posts, no press, no statements, but legal is tracing his connections to the seat change. We're close to confirming he or someone from his team made the call to override your booking. Miles rubbed his temples. I don't want revenge, he said. I want repair. I want systemic exposure, not a single scapegoat. Jenna nodded. We can do both. The question is, what's the next move? Tasha chimed in. People want to hear your voice. Miles, not just statements, your voice. He thought for a moment, then stood. Fine, he said. We go live again, but not just a response. We frame a demand, and not just for me. He stepped toward the desk, grabbing a pen and notepad. On the page, he wrote a title, The Passenger Rights Pledge. We start something bigger, he said, a pledge from airlines, a declaration of unbiased protocols, mandatory training, oversight, independent arbitration when disputes like this happen in flight. That's ambitious, Jenna said, watching his pen move across the page. It's overdue, Miles replied. If this ends with me getting my seat back and a free voucher, then I've failed. Tasha pulled up a video template. What do you want to say? Miles turned to the camera, eyes steady. I want to speak to every person who's ever been told quietly that they don't belong. To every passenger who's been looked at sideways because of their name, their hair, their tone, or the zip code they come from. This isn't about one flight. This is about a system. He looked straight at the lens, and we're going to change it. He took a breath, then continued. Solace Air may have started this conversation, but they won't get to end it. Not without accountability, and not without action. The video ran just under 4 minutes by the time Jenna posted it. Dear Passenger Dignity. Now was trending in 5 cities across the country. People began sharing their own stories. Quiet humiliations on planes, delays caused by unfounded suspicions, families asked to move without explanation. Black mothers questioned for traveling with their children. Brown teenagers pulled aside for random searches. The floodgates opened, and with them came allies, corporate leaders, influencers, civil rights lawyers, public figures. But there was also pushback. Anonymous accounts calling Miles dramatic, comments accusing him of playing the race card, memes mocking his voice, his words, his composure. He saw them all, but he refused to engage. Jenna fielded requests from 4 news outlets for primetime interviews. Tasha's Twitter thread detailing the events on board was featured on a national morning show. And behind the scenes, The FAA sent a request for documentation. Quiet but official. The wheels of change had begun to turn. Still, the night was heavy. Miles stepped out onto the balcony, letting the wind tousle his collar. In the distance, a plane curved across the evening sky. He thought about his father, a baggage handler for 3 decades. Quiet, disciplined, the kind of man who never asked for attention, only fairness. He remembered once, as a boy, watching his father get passed over for a supervisor promotion by someone younger, less experienced, and much louder. When Miles asked him why he didn't fight it, his father had just said, "Some battles are bigger than one man. Timing matters. Maybe this was the time. Maybe this was the battle." Jenna came out onto the balcony. "There's a woman in PR at Solace," she said. Off the record, she told me they're scared, that this has legs. Miles looked at her. Good, let them squirm. She also said something else. The executive handling this internally is Clayton's cousin. Miles's shoulders dropped. Of course it was. This isn't just one bad actor, he said. It's a culture, and that's what we expose. Jenna replied, inside the room. Tasha had turned on the TV. A headline ran across the bottom of the screen, CEO allegedly targeted on Solace flight, racism in the skies. Miles stepped back inside. He watched the segment play out. Calm, but alert. The anchor's voice was serious, but not sensational. The footage of him being approached in seat 2A played again, frame by frame. He noticed something new. In the background, Clayton smiled. Subtle, small, but there. A smirk at the edge of chaos. Miles froze the screen. "Get me the timestamp," he told Tasha. She nodded and wrote it down. "That's not just bias," Miles said. "That's orchestration." And he was done being a pawn in someone else's narrative. Now, it was time to move the board. The following morning arrived heavy with anticipation. Miles Harrington sat on the edge of his hotel bed, staring at the muted television screen where news anchors dissected the unfolding situation like it was breaking sports coverage. The banner headline read, "CEO Speaks Out, Racial Profiling on Board Flight 418. The footage rolled again, his calm voice, his removal from the seat, the tension-laced walk to row 31. He turned the television off. Outside the window, the Atlanta sky was overcast. The light seemed unsure of itself, struggling through layers of cloud. Miles ran a hand across his face. He hadn't slept. Not deeply. Not really. Jenna Cruz entered the room with a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. Her usual, polished energy was frayed at the edges, but she was focused. "They're panicking," she said without even a hello. Solace Air has called 3 emergency board meetings since last night. They're coordinating with legal, trying to decide whether to issue a second apology or risk radio silence. "Let them panic," Miles said. "The silence will only make the storm louder." Tasha Raymond arrived next, holding a copy of a local newspaper folded in half. She tossed it onto the coffee table, revealing the headline, "Out of Line at Altitude." The subheading read, "Tech CEO removed from first class without cause. Airline faces backlash. They're already trying to frame it like a mistake," she said. "A miscommunication, one that just happened to target a black CEO." "Of course they are," Jenna added. "And Clayton still hasn't surfaced. His LinkedIn is dark. His socials are deactivated. That smirk caught on video. It's now a meme." Miles remained seated, elbows on knees, fingers laced. He wasn't smiling, not even slightly. This is what they do, he said quietly. They hope the noise burns itself out, that the anger thins, that tomorrow's headline buries today's truth, but not this time, Tasha said. Not if you keep pushing. Jenna handed him the tablet. Today's interview is set, she said. You're going on with Bryn James from Horizon News. She's smart, doesn't take bait, but she'll ask you tough questions. Good, Miles said. He rose and walked over to the window, staring at the airport in the distance. Planes lifting off, landing, unaware of the reckoning on the ground. His voice softened. My father used to tell me that when storms hit, pilots don't turn around. They rise above the clouds. He turned back to face them. That's what we're doing. We're flying through it. At noon sharp, they arrived at the Horizon studio. Miles was guided through hair and makeup, mic'd and seated under hot lights. Bryn James entered with a calm smile and sharp eyes. She was poised, her presence commanding. Mr. Harrington, she said, shaking his hand. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the invitation, he replied. The camera light blinked red. The interview began. Mr. Harrington, you've said publicly that what happened to you was more than a simple seating issue. Can you explain what you believe took place? Miles nodded. This wasn't about a seat. It was about perception, about being seen as an anomaly in a space I earned the right to occupy. When I was removed from first class without cause, it sent a message, not just to me, but to every person watching. And that message was Bryn prompted. That dignity is conditional, Miles said, that respect is selective, and that no matter how far you rise, someone can still try to bring you back down quietly. Bryn leaned in slightly. You've now called for structural reform within the airline industry. Some critics say this is an overreaction to a single incident. What do you say to them? I say, look at the pattern. Miles replied, I'm not the first. I won't be the last. There are thousands of stories like mine, most of them ignored. The only difference is mine was caught on camera. This isn't isolated, it's systemic. The interview continued for 15 minutes. He spoke calmly, deliberately. He spoke of leadership, of inherited silence, of the burden of representation. He didn't just speak for himself. He spoke for every unspoken moment someone had swallowed, afraid that speaking would cost them more than it would change. When the interview ended, Bryn turned to him off camera. You know, she said softly, I've flown that route. I've seen it happen. Thank you for not staying silent. He gave a small nod. Thank you for listening. Back at the hotel, the clip went viral within hours. It was reshared by athletes, authors, politicians, celebrities, civil rights organizations, and everyday passengers who had finally found the words they never knew how to say. Solace Air finally released a second statement. It was longer, slicker, but just as hollow. They claimed the seat was reassigned for operational safety and that Mr. Harrington's experience is not reflective of our values. They offered a private apology and a refund. Miles refused both. Instead, he posted a single image, his empty seat in first class, captioned, "This seat stayed empty, but your silence shouldn't." The post shattered every record on his profile. By nightfall, something else happened. A leaked internal email surfaced from Solace Air's operations hub in Chicago. It confirmed what Miles and his team already suspected. Clayton Reese had used his cousin's internal login to override the manifest system. The justification removed 2A, reassign guest to back, don't make noise, avoid escalation, Keep optics clean. The email was time-stamped 30 minutes before boarding. Jenna's phone lit up. "You need to see this," she said, turning the screen toward Miles. It was the email. Clear, undeniable. Miles stared at it. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood, walked to the window again, and looked out over the airport lots. "They tried to erase me," he said, "but they didn't just fail. They exposed themselves." Tasha stepped closer. "You know what this means, right? It means we go higher," he said, "higher than fear, higher than bias, higher than the storm." And he wasn't done flying yet. The morning after the email leak, Solace Air's headquarters in Chicago was in full-blown crisis mode. The internal chain of command had fractured under scrutiny. Executives scrambled behind closed doors, desperately assembling talking points while legal teams sent out non-disclosure agreements like confetti. But outside those walls, the pressure kept building. The world now knew exactly what had happened. The override code, the premeditated manipulation, the quiet, calculated erasure of one passenger from first class. Miles Harrington sat in the green room of a major network studio in New York City. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had been in Atlanta. Now, he was scheduled for a live panel interview alongside 2 legal analysts and a former airline diversity officer. Tasha Raymond scrolled through comments on her phone nearby. Jenna Cruz paced near the door, already fielding calls from 3 publications. A press aide from the show peeked in, headset cocked to one ear. 5 minutes, the aide said, then ducked back out. Miles adjusted the cuffs of his navy blue blazer. His face was calm, but his stomach churned with unease. Not fear exactly, but responsibility. A quiet gravity that had been growing with each public word, each interview, each reposted clip. "You doing okay?" Jenna asked. He nodded, just thinking about what he looked over at her. How many people never get this chance? To be heard, to have proof, to see the lie get caught red-handed. Jenna sat down beside him. "You know why it matters that you're doing this." "Right." He turned toward her. "Because you're not just speaking as a CEO," she said. "You're speaking as the person everyone else was told to stay quiet for. You're the one they point to and say, 'See, he made it. He played the game. He followed the rules.' And they need to see what happens when even that isn't enough." Before Miles could reply, the door opened. "Time," the aide said. They walked down the hallway together. Lights, cameras, a live audience just beyond the curtain. He stepped onto the stage, shook hands with the other panelists, and took his seat. The moderator welcomed the viewers. The first question came quickly. "Mr. Harrington." Solace Air has now confirmed the override came from within their system. "Do you believe this was a personal attack or a systemic failure?" Miles didn't flinch. "Both," he said. "It was a personal decision carried out by a system that allowed it, without safeguards, without transparency, and with a long-standing tolerance for bias disguised as protocol." The conversation deepened. The legal analyst discussed liability. The former airline executive described how subjective safety concerns were often used to mask personal prejudices in flight operations. Then came the audience question. A woman stood up, middle-aged, black. Her voice was steady but tight. "Mr. Harrington, what would you say to people who have gone through something like this but didn't have cameras or a platform or a team behind them?" Miles leaned forward. "I'd say I believe you," he said. I'd say it's real. Even when there's no video, I'd say your story matters, and your silence doesn't make it any less true." The applause came softly, then stronger. After the segment ended, the moderator approached him off camera. "You're setting off a national conversation," she said. "Keep going." Back in the dressing room, Jenna was already coordinating the next steps. "Solace has just been subpoenaed," she said. "The Department of Transportation is opening a formal investigation into discriminatory practices." Miles sat down, finally allowing himself to exhale, and then his phone rang. It was Dev Patel. Miles stepped into the hallway and answered. "Dev," he said. "Miles, they fired me." The words hit like a cold slap. "What?" "This morning," Dev said. "They said it was due to performance issues. I've never had a single write-up, not in 10 years. But after that email leaked, I guess they decided I was too visible." Miles clenched his jaw. "I'm so sorry." "Dev." "No," Dev said. "Don't be. I'd do it again. I just thought you should know." "Send me your documentation," Miles said. "I'll take care of it." After the call ended, Miles returned to the room, face hard with quiet fury. "They're retaliating," he said. Dev was fired. Jenna's expression shifted instantly. "We'll get a legal team on it. We'll make it public. Let them see what accountability looks like." Miles didn't sit down. He turned to Tasha. "You still have that footage?" She nodded. "Put together a new clip," he said. "Frame it like a timeline. Add Dev's voice. Let people see what standing up costs and why we need to keep going." That evening, the video dropped. It wasn't flashy, no music, no effects, just a quiet edit of the original incident, the leaked email, and a closing voiceover from Dev Patel. "They told me to be quiet, that it wasn't my place to question what I saw, but silence would have made me complicit, and I didn't get into this job to help people feel small." The response was immediate. Support for Dev poured in. A fundraiser was started for him within the hour. Within 12, it had crossed $70,000. Other airline employees past and present began to speak up. Anonymous testimonies, screenshots of internal memos, training protocols riddled with vague language. The cracks in the structure had become fractures. By the next morning, Solace Air's stock dropped nearly 8%. Major corporate sponsors paused partnerships. The story was on every morning show, and inside a quiet boardroom in New York, Miles sat with his legal team, drafting a proposal. "The Passenger Dignity Accord," he said, placing the document in front of the room. "It's time for airlines to adopt a new standard, one with oversight, with consequences, with real human protections." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The storm was already here, but now it had direction. The conference room in Solace Air's Chicago headquarters was stark and cold, illuminated only by the harsh glow of fluorescent lights and the flicker of laptop screens. The air was thick with tension as the executive team gathered around the long polished table. Heads bowed in meetings over shareholder concerns, crisis management strategies, and legal ramifications. At the center of the storm was Gregory Thompson, the regional manager who had reluctantly become the company's public face in recent days. His suit was impeccable, but his hands trembled ever so slightly as he shuffled through a stack of papers, termination letters, official statements, and the damning internal email that had sparked national outrage. The room fell silent as the CEO, William Parker, entered with measured steps. His usual commanding presence was shadowed by fatigue. Years in corporate leadership had taught him to weather storms, but this was unlike any he had faced before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Parker began, his voice steady yet grave. "We are at a crossroads. The incident involving Mr. Harrington was unacceptable, and the evidence is irrefutable. I want to be clear, there will be consequences." He paused, looking each person in the eyes. "We have identified 9 employees whose actions directly contributed to the incident, from the gate agents in Chicago to the flight crew on board. This includes the lead flight attendant, Lindsay Monroe, and Captain Richard Cole. Their failure to follow protocol and verify facts has endangered our company's reputation and violated the trust of our customers." Gregory cleared his throat. "The legal department has advised immediate termination for all involved. The letters are prepared. We must act swiftly to show accountability." Murmurs rippled through the room. One senior executive raised a hand. "Is this not extreme? Some of these employees have decades of service. Are we scapegoating individuals for systemic issues?" Parker's eyes hardened. "This is about responsibility. No system can succeed if those who operate it act on bias rather than facts. We must send a clear message." Outside the room, the media frenzy continued unabated. News vans lined the street, reporters clamored for statements, and social media exploded with the hashtag Solace Accountability trending nationwide. Back at a hotel suite in New York, Miles Harrington watched the live feeds on his tablet. Jenna Cruz sat beside him, updating their legal team. Tasha Raymond scrolled through her growing dossier of testimonies and documents sent from airline employees and passengers alike. "We're getting support from other CEOs," Jenna said. "Several major airlines are expressing interest in adopting your passenger dignity accord." Miles nodded thoughtfully. "This is bigger than any one company," he said quietly. "This is about changing a culture." Tasha looked up. "There are reports of anonymous Solace employees fearing retaliation for speaking out. They're afraid their careers will be destroyed." Miles clenched his fists. Retaliation won't stop the truth. Just then, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Dev Patel. "I have good news. A former Solace executive contacted me. She's willing to testify about internal pressures to manage optics and handle sensitive passengers quietly. She wants anonymity, but says the culture runs deeper than anyone imagined." Miles exhaled slowly. "This is the breaking point," he said. Meanwhile, across the country, Heather Monroe sat alone in a small apartment. The once vibrant flight attendant's eyes were hollow, reflecting the glow of a muted television broadcasting the ongoing scandal. Her phone vibrated relentlessly with missed calls and texts. She had been one of the 9 terminated employees. 15 years of service ended with a cold letter and a media storm. Regret filled her, but so did confusion and fear for what came next. After days of reflection, Heather made a decision. She reached out to Vanessa Mitchell, the civil rights attorney who had been quietly advising Miles. Heather wanted to share her story, not to excuse her actions, but to help others avoid the same mistakes. In a small conference room, weeks later, Heather stood before a group of corporate leaders and trainers. Her voice was shaky but earnest. "I made terrible choices," she began. "I followed orders without questioning. I let bias cloud my judgment. But I want to learn. I want to help change this." Her words resonated. She became a speaker for corporate anti-bias programs, traveling the country to share her experience as a cautionary tale. back in Chicago, the firings sent shockwaves through Solace Air. The gate agent who had taken the call from Clayton Reese's cousin struggled to find new employment. The captain who had defended Lindsay Monroe entered a protracted union arbitration process. But change was inevitable. Solace Air's board appointed Dr. Jasmine Reynolds as their first chief diversity officer. A respected leader in corporate inclusion, she launched comprehensive retraining programs, revised complaint procedures, and established an independent review board for discrimination claims. Meanwhile, Miles continued his work. The Passenger Dignity Accord gained momentum, with airlines nationwide pledging to adopt its principles. Legislators began drafting bills aimed at protecting passengers from discrimination in transit. On a quiet evening, Miles stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Jenna approached with a cup of coffee. "You've come a long way," she said softly. Miles smiled faintly. "The journey's just beginning." She nodded, "But this time, the foundation is stronger. Together." They looked toward the horizon, toward a future where dignity wasn't a privilege granted by others, but a right protected for all. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Miles Harrington's penthouse. The Chicago skyline stretched beyond the horizon, a sprawling testament to ambition, resilience, and the countless stories hidden behind every lit window. Miles stood by the window, cradling a warm cup of coffee, reflecting on the chain of events that had begun almost a year ago. A simple flight, a denied seat, and a choice that rippled far beyond that cabin. Behind him, Jenna Cruz entered with a stack of papers and a bright smile. "The Foundation's first grant recipients are confirmed," she announced. 50 minority entrepreneurs across 5 states. Their projects range from clean energy to affordable healthcare technology. Miles turned, the weariness of months now replaced by quiet pride. "This is why we do this," he said softly. "Not just for me, or that seat on the plane, but for everyone who's been told they don't belong." Jenna nodded. "Did you see the news last night? Solace Air's stock is up 15%. Investors are responding positively to the reforms. Dr. Reynolds has already been invited to speak at several corporate conferences." Miles allowed himself a small smile. It seems change does come at a cost, but it can also bring renewal. Their conversation was interrupted by a text from Tasha Raymond. "Interview with Heather Monroe published. It's gaining traction. People are talking about redemption and accountability." Miles sat down, feeling the weight of the journey settling into a place of hope. He recalled the moment Heather had reached out, the courage it took to face her mistakes and speak openly about bias and responsibility. Her story was now part of a growing dialogue about how companies must confront their past to build a better future. Later that day, Miles found himself at the lobby of Solace Air's revamped training center. He was there to attend the launch of the Passenger Dignity Accord, a formal ceremony with airline executives, civil rights leaders, and advocacy groups. The room buzzed with anticipation. Dr. Jasmine Reynolds stepped up to the podium, her voice clear and inspiring. "This accord represents a commitment, a pledge that no passenger will be judged by anything other than their humanity, that dignity and respect are not privileges but rights, that every employee, from gate agent to captain, will be trained to uphold these principles." Miles listened as the crowd applauded. He thought about the countless moments that led here, the silenced voices, the public confrontations, the personal struggles. He was no longer just a man who lost a seat. He was a catalyst. When it was his turn, Miles addressed the assembly. This accord is more than policy. It is a promise to those who have suffered in silence, to those who've been pushed aside or made to feel invisible. This is for every passenger who deserves a seat not just on a plane but at the table. The room rose in applause. Outside, reporters lined the sidewalk, eager to capture the moment. Cameras flashed, capturing smiles and solemn nods. The story had become bigger than a single flight. It was now a movement. Back in his penthouse that evening, Miles opened his laptop to review the latest applications for the Foundation's second round of grants. Among them was a proposal from a young woman developing AI-driven accessibility tools for disabled travelers. He paused and smiled. Progress wasn't perfect. It wasn't always swift, but it was happening. His phone buzzed again. A message from Dev Patel. New job offer. Senior customer experience role with a company committed to inclusion. Thank you for believing in me. Miles typed back quickly. Your integrity changed the story. As he leaned back, the city lights twinkled below like stars come to earth. He thought of his father, who had carried dignity in silence, and his mother's words about justice tempered with compassion. He realized that true leadership was not just about power or success, it was about standing firm in moments of injustice, about creating pathways for others, and about believing in the possibility of change. The seat on that plane was just the beginning. Now, it was time to soar. Miles Harrington's story reminds us that dignity and respect are not privileges reserved for a few. They are rights that belong to every person, regardless of where they sit or who they are. What started as a quiet act of exclusion on a flight became a powerful testament to resilience, courage, and the need for systemic change. We see how silent discrimination can wound deeply, but also how standing firm and speaking out can inspire transformation not only in corporations but in hearts and minds everywhere. This is a call to action for all of us. To recognize bias when we see it, to support those who face injustice, and to demand accountability when systems fail to protect us. Discrimination is still alive in many forms, but together, we can shine a light on it and change the narrative. Thank you for watching this story of courage and change. If it moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that challenge injustice and celebrate humanity. Stay tuned because the fight for equality continues, and your voice matters.